Hello, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Moment, Reimagining the Future. My name is Jill Tidman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Redford Center. I would like to begin our time together by taking a moment to respectfully acknowledge and honor the people who came before us, who are with us, and the future generations to come wherever we are. In my case, I live and work on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As a reminder, the process of colonization is ongoing and still adversely affects Indigenous people in many communities, including the San Francisco Bay Area. And because we are all in different parts of the country, please feel free to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of the lands you are on today. We do this to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of Indigenous communities everywhere, to affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples, and to take responsibility for improving relations between nations. Please join me at a moment of reflection, to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and to consider how we are and how we can each try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to the process of working to dismantle ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and to recognize the hundreds of Indigenous nations who continue to resist, live, and uphold their sacred relations across their lands. At the Redford Center, we leverage the power of stories to galvanize environmental health and justice. And in particular, we understand the important role of youth voices in this effort and are honored to be able to support a new generation of storytellers through our Redford Center Stories program, which was designed to showcase the unique insights and personal stories that young people have to share with the world, and to support educators in teaching environmental justice to assist our youth in preparing for their future. The Redford Center Stories curriculum includes opportunities to experience many different film projects that the Redford Center has made and supported. And the program invites young people to join a growing community of environmental storytellers and to make their own 90-second film as part of the Redford Center Stories Challenge. We are joined today by a number of students and educators participating in this year's program. And I want to acknowledge the challenges facing our educators and students right now in the wake of the ongoing pandemic, with so much uncertainty surrounding your day-to-day lives and the need to be flexible and pivot with a moment's notice. To all the educators and students with us right now, we see you. And today, together, we will do the work of reimagining a future which prioritizes your needs. We hope these films and the conversation inspires you to share your visions and voices. And we have such an incredible program today. Huge thanks to the Redford Center Stories team and other Redford Center team members supporting in creating this space for all of us to have this experience. And now, I'm thrilled to introduce you to our host and moderator for the event today, Arthi Govind. Arthi is the program officer leading the Stories program this year, and we are so grateful to have her with us at the Redford Center and in this essential role. I'll let you take it from here, Arthi.
Thank you, Jill, and welcome, everyone. I'm excited to have you all here today and to converse with the inspiring filmmakers, artists, and activists joining us today. Our event is called Reimagining the Future, and together we'll explore how individuals and communities are building new futures in the wake of environmental crises. We'll discuss actions we can take to make our urban and rural environments healthier, how people are adapting to the climate crisis in environments that have already suffered irreparable damage, and what we can do to conserve our remaining biodiversity. We're going to begin by watching films made by our guest speakers, and then we'll launch into a conversation with them. If you have any questions for our filmmakers, the live audience will have the opportunity to ask our panelists questions during the conversation. So please type any questions that come up for you into the chat on YouTube. Now we'll launch into watching our films. Our first film, Green Swell, by Jamie Tarrow, asks what we can do to protect wildlife facing a number of different environmental crises. This film was a recipient of distinction in our 2021 Stories Challenge. Jamie Tarot is 12 years old. She lives in New Jersey and is in the 6th grade. She loves the natural world and feels very lucky to have traveled to South Africa, Mexico, and Canada. She's had an elephant walk through her campsite, a bush baby pee on her, and once mistook a vervet monkey that snuck in the car and was sitting next to her for her brother. She also once saw the horror of poaching firsthand, a rhino killed for its horn. One of her worst nightmares is growing up in a world where nature doesn't exist, so she's decided to take action. Here is Greenswell.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm 11 and I live in New Jersey. When I think of environmental justice, I think of all humans, regardless of race, class, gender, having access to the beauties of nature. I also think of justice for animals, the freedom to roam peacefully. So I've been interviewing green makers, people who protect and preserve the environment in the hope that others will take a stand.
If there was some pollutant in the water or on land, it would unfortunately get into their body. And if we start seeing frog populations drop in our area, it might let us know that there's something wrong.
All living things deserve their place in this world. They are all part of it. And so I think that we should protect birds out of respect.
What's your biggest challenge after poaching to protect wildlife?
We have right on the boundary of these game reserves lies the largest density of rural South Africans, which means there's a high population of people and very low job opportunities. And that mixture, that combination is a huge threat.
Can you be a green maker too?
Our second film today is part of a 4-part short film series called Adaptation by Alizé Carrere, the full films of which can be found on PBS Learning Media online. We'll show a part of Floating Gardens of Bangladesh, which shows how communities in Bangladesh are working to adapt to worsening flooding in their region. Alizé Carrere is a National Geographic explorer, filmmaker, and PhD candidate examining the myriad ways people adapt to environmental change. In 2013, Alizé received support from National Geographic to conduct research in Madagascar, where she spent several months uncovering an unlikely agricultural adaptation in response to severe deforestation. This work evolved into a broader educational film project that has taken her around the world, documenting stories about people and climate change in India, Bangladesh, Vanuatu, Norway, and the United States. Here is a clip from Floating Gardens of Bangladesh.
The people here have had to become really resilient and come up with creative solutions to deal with some of these incredible challenges, which most people in this day and age don't have answers to. For Bangladesh, this involves a future that floats. And it starts with floating gardens.
We're headed towards a fresh raft right now that's been freshly made with all this water hyacinth.
What I'm learning is that this right here is made of bamboo, cow dung, and this plant, kochupana.
Water hyacinth.
Yeah, it's found all over the land, and what they did was something very innovative. They took the kochupana and applied it here, which makes it sturdy.
What Tanya's explaining is how the floating rafts are made. Farmers start with water hyacinth, a tightly knit water weed that floats, piling layers of it together to be crushed down into a compact bed. Next, they'll lay down long bamboo rods to help with form and structure. Then, another several layers of water hyacinth will be added to bind everything together. Finally, a thin layer of cow manure or fertilizer will be placed on top, upon which crops are then planted. The entire raft-making process takes about 15 days. Are we swimming? We're headed to the floating gardens right now, where we're going to watch how the women harvest their food in circumstances like this. What appears to be soil is just the natural degradation process.
It rots on its own. They have squash, they have cucumbers, they have okra. They basically have a farm.
Which is pretty incredible because we're not even on soil, we're on a water weed, basically.
We're literally standing on water weed right now.
Traditional floating farms work well in the southern parts of Bangladesh, where water levels rise during monsoon season. In northern parts of Bangladesh, you find wider rivers, higher floods, and stronger currents. For this area, floating gardens have been further adapted using sturdier materials.
Once the floods hit, their crops get destroyed. And that's why these preventative measures have been taken so that the locals can stay afloat, have their eggs, have their fish, and their vegetables to eat and survive.
In the northwestern region near Pabna, we find farmers learning how to build multi-layer farm units that float, thanks to the work of a local NGO called Shidhulai Swanirvar Sansa. Here, they're built using bamboo frames supported by recycled plastic jugs, which are filled with soil to grow crops.
That's another squash.
So they have tilapia fish in this structure over here.
On this more advanced version, you'll also find fish pens in between the frames, where tilapia are being raised. Also attached is a floating duck coop, giving local farmers another important protein: eggs.
We see ducks, we see fish, and we see agriculture all in one unit. It's a whole meal over here.
Next, we are going to watch a shortened version of We the Trees by Isabella O'Brien. She made We the Trees this past summer to highlight the important balancing role that forests play and how deforestation undoes that balance. Isabella O'Brien is a 14-year-old artist and activist, and she enjoys spending her time making short films on environmental topics in hope of bringing awareness and a deeper appreciation for our home. In 2021, her short film Nature was given an award in the Redford Center Stories Challenge. Nature gave her a place in the summer 2021 Planet 911 Youth Film Fellowship, where she made her film We the Trees, directed to help others realize what we can learn from trees. Here is the short version of We the Trees.
All over the world, trees stand. Light hits their leaves in beautiful ways. The rays of sun touch each member in the forest, creating a complete image of individuals. Their shapes sharpen and blur into hazes, their posture varied, arms whimsical, their leaves unfurl before the world, itching for sunlight, absorbing CO2, releasing O2 into this blue space above, keeping an incredible balance in nature. Trees, the neighbors we depend on. Trees, the ones that could save us. The forest does a thesaurus, giving you all the space to express your thoughts, almost as eloquently as trees themselves do, through their generation and generation built community-like support systems. Maybe at first could be compared to the internet, but deeper than technological communications, mycorrhizal networks connect trees underground through fungi, no need for an alphabet. The fungi act as communication tunnels for the trees. With this asset, mycelium fungal networks and their connected roots enable trees to work together in a manner humanity could do to take some notes on. But these processes that are necessary to trees' well-being can't happen when we disrupt their environment. When trees are plucked out of their communities, the surrounding forest is at risk. Just like a forest cares for every member, we must remember that we are nearly 8 billion people. Instead of using that power to the max, we must thoughtfully consider that leaving areas untouched can tremendously benefit us. 28 million hectares of trees are lost each year, 30 football fields per minute. 77 species of trees have become extinct over the past 100 years. Think about that. This isn't about whether we're a Democrat or not. It's about us caring for each habitat in this planet. Because this frequency of tree loss is increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, desertification and soil erosion, bringing fewer crops, more flooding and problems for indigenous communities. Not to mention how unreasonable it is to strip ourselves of our own oxygen producers, because the trees we have right now, a fifth through the 21st century, are holding in 400 megatons of CO2, an amount 4 times the power than the largest bomb. Imagine if that were to be released. So, if you have not received the memo, no more are we tiptoeing around climate issues. We are confident, never reaching a plateau in our motivation to preserve the golden glow of Earth's meadows, Earth's willows, Earth's wild indigos. We need to be confident now, because the problems have become too familiar. Forget we're on different continents. We all live on the same surface. We cannot be stuck in a time long ago. Neither can we pull this off solo, but we must take action now to change tomorrow.
Finally, we will watch Making of City Regreening Sequence by Mike Schmidt. This presentation shows how the California Academy of Sciences is reimagining what the San Francisco Bay Area could look like if it widely embraced environmental restoration in urban spaces. The film also discusses the process of creating a visualization of regreening for museum goers. Mike Schmidt is a visual effects supervisor at the California Academy of Sciences Visualization Studio. He has been a visual effects artist and filmmaker for over 25 years. He loves making movies, especially the problem solving and the collaboration it entails. Here is the Making of City Regreening Sequence.
Mike Schmidt from the California Academy of Sciences Visualization Studio. We're located in this amazing building in Golden Gate Park. Our films play in the Morrison Planetarium, and this is what it looks like in the Dome Theater. The dome is 75 feet in diameter. It surrounds you and creates an immersive experience that's pretty incredible. We recently completed a film called Living Worlds. Here's the trailer. This film tells the story of the coevolution of life and planet Earth and how that informs our search for life elsewhere in the solar system and our galaxy. The topic of looking for life elsewhere is a way to reflect on the longevity of our species and how we can coexist with our planet. The show also visualizes some future missions that may be deployed in order to search for signatures of life beyond Earth. Towards the end of the show, we created a computer-generated scene called the City Regreening Sequence. This scene is a time-lapse animation of the Bay Area changing over the next century, with the animation driven by restorative and resilient land use concepts, grounded in geospatial data. From a vantage point high above, we watch a transition to a future Bay Area with restored ecosystems, watersheds, and shorelines interwoven with a more resilient, livable urban fabric filled with trees. As a visual effects artist with a passion for science storytelling, what I really enjoyed about working on the scene was the process of discovery and the research involved. There's an incredible amount of data available and work being done to mitigate many of the problems with our natural and urban landscapes of the Bay Area, not to mention the state of California and beyond. We utilized data from the historical Baylands and Bayshore inventory from the San Francisco Estuary Institute, also watershed and riparian data from the Conservation Lands Network. In the 3D visual effects software called Houdini, we combined these datasets with OpenStreetMap infrastructure, aerial photography from the USDA, coastal digital elevation maps, and sea level rise projections from the Our Coast, Our Future initiative. We also learned from many useful studies and design competitions geared towards providing a set of tools and ideas to equitably restore and improve our shorelines, ecosystems, and neighborhoods. And here is the finished scene narrated by David Diggs. Enjoy.
Right now, we only know one example of life in the universe. Us. Over billions of years, life has evolved to thrive on Earth. But our civilization is still young. Our planet's spectral fingerprint looks out of balance, showing signs of unnatural pollutants, of escalating carbon dioxide threatening to warm our planet dangerously. Over time, we can change this. We can learn the lessons of our living world, partnering with life, becoming integral to and interwoven with the natural world. Imagine a future in which our technologies enrich our planet instead of draining its resources. In which humans see themselves as part of nature rather than above it. In which our species forms a vital strand in a vibrant web of life. Such a world could broadcast its presence to the universe for a very long time.
What a great set of films and presentations to start this year and reimagine new ways forward, utilizing old and new technology to address environmental crises around the globe. Now, I'd like to invite our filmmakers to join me in a conversation about environmentalism and storytelling. If you have questions for our guest speakers, please feel free to ask them in the YouTube chat, and we will get to them later in the program. Now, please join me in welcoming Jamie Tarrow, Alize Carrere, Isabella O'Brien, and Mike Schmidt. Welcome, everyone. So I would love to begin by asking all of you, why do you think storytelling is important for the environmental movement?
I'm happy to offer a preliminary response to this. As somebody who's both in academia as well as filmmaking, I can attest to the power of storytelling for really getting politicians and the general public on board in ways that scientific research papers might not, or not that the science, of course, isn't important, but that it might be in languages or ways of speaking and communicating that aren't as palatable for a general audience. And in some ways, I find that storytelling actually has a much greater impact in reaching people and getting people to have an emotional connection to the very complex set of problems that we're experiencing. And I do both. I'm in academia and I'm also in the storytelling aspect. And just from my firsthand experience, the storytelling component really reaches people in profound and very moving ways.
I agree. I think storytelling, it's how we learn, it's how we get inspired, it's how we find hope. And I think our world without stories is a truly strange world. Like, we lean on these experiences of others to guide each other and ourselves through challenges. Through stories, we find courage, and it's how we've been coping through the pandemic, and it's how we're going to change, because we're going to make sure future generations get to see the beauty of Earth at its fullest. And stories change people, and this is why stories are so important.
Jamie, would you like to say something?
I just think it really does what a paper can't, and it just makes people see like how impassioned you are and how much you do care.
Yeah, I agree with all of you too. And first off, I feel I'm humbled being a part of this panel with all of you. The films you made are incredible. I'm very inspired. Thank you very much. And I hope you've inspired other people as well. As an artist, I'm not a scientist. I also agree that storytelling is incredibly powerful. Like, we can use art to tell stories about science because we cannot solve the ecological crisis without science. However, communicating science can be hard, and using art to do that, I think, is a very good way to do it. So those of you in the audience, if you're interested in storytelling, stories can take the form of many different mediums. You could be a photographer, you could compose music, you could write a short story, a short film with animation like we saw today. All of those stories are very important. And if you just touch one person with your story and influence them and motivate them to go outside and explore the natural world, I think you've done a good service for this planet and life on this planet.
Thank you all so much for those wonderful answers. And Mike, your answer just really transitions beautifully to another question that I had, which is, for anyone out there, particularly our students who are watching and might be interested in making a film or telling a story, what's a piece of advice each of you would give to someone who wants to tell a story about environmentalism?
I guess I'll start with that one. First, I would say that there is no bad story about the natural world. So believe in yourself first, and then believe in your idea, and then make it happen. And just explore it. And while you're exploring that story and making that story or telling that story, you will learn a lot about the subject as well. I mean, that's what I love about what I do is, as an artist, I am learning so much about science and the way the world works.
Anyone else have any wisdom for anyone who wants to tell a story? Jamie, I saw you unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'd really just say you just have to go for it and just like do as much stuff as possible. I mean, I'm not a public speaker. I don't enjoy it, but you just like have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, and I also think thinking about what influences you is important. I'm very moved by paintings and artwork. So the films I create on environmentalism center around that. And I don't think everyone connects with words as they do with imagery. So it's important to have a balance with stories. And that's why films are so incredible, because they allow people to see with their eyes what is so entirely possible.
And that's so true, Isabella. And I just will piggyback on that comment by saying that one of the things I have found to be very powerful is when you do really integrate in some way yourself into the story. I think a lot of people really connect more with stories where they can see the kind of author or the person or the voice behind it. And I think across several of our pieces, that's the case. And it can be, I certainly was not comfortable with that initially. I was not ever going to even appear on camera in my series. And then I was pushed to, and I think that pushed through in a good way. And I think that ultimately helped kind of demystify who the storyteller is and help you connect with the person who's giving you this information. So I don't think you should shy away from sharing yourself and your own story where and when it makes sense.
I love all of that. And Alize, you pointed out something that I was going to point out as well, which is something that I love about each of your films and presentations that we shared today is that each of you took actually a very different approach in talking about different environmental topics, but there was, use of different types of artistic work. There were, interviews. There was, more like traditional documentary style filmmaking, and then there was like, digital animation. And so there was, just all kinds of different uses of different types of media and artistic expression. And so, along those lines, I would love to know a little bit more about, how did you come up with the idea for your film or project? And how did you move that idea into an action?
I guess I can start. So I think I came up with the idea for trees. It wasn't exactly new. I was raised in a very visual family, and from a young age I had this deep appreciation for trees, and I was kind of taught to draw and paint what I found beautiful. And at the time, like when I started drawing and painting these trees around my new home in California, I didn't have much awareness for what was happening to them in other parts of the world until I started reading and paying attention to the news. And I think I had quite a lot of anger for the destruction that we were doing to these natural habitats dependent on trees. And I think over quarantine, I started making these presentations on trees, not particularly for anyone besides my family, but what really moved me to start doing things that would impact was when I started my One Earth Club at school. I joined it, which was holding an environmental film project that really set me off on a path of sharing publicly what I believe on the things I care for most, trees.
I guess I'll go next. So I've been working at the California Academy of Sciences for almost 12 years. And prior to that, I was a visual effects artist working on Hollywood films. And I just hit the jackpot finding this position working at this incredible museum that's filled with incredible science about the natural world, and having the opportunity to make films about the science that's being done there and the science that's being done around the world. So we've done about 8 films, I think, now, and Living Worlds is the latest one that came out about a few months ago. And we're always trying to pick topics about cutting edge science, important science, and what's being done. What the up to date science is and how rigorous it is. And this latest film, Living Worlds, was an opportunity for us to talk about the work that's being done to search for life beyond Earth, and then how that reflects upon how we treat our life on our own planet. It's almost like holding up a mirror. By looking out there in the galaxy, we're looking back at ourselves. And it was an incredible opportunity to talk about this and talk about what's happening and what's going to happen in the future in terms of the science that's moving forward. And we worked with some incredible scientists, for example, that advised us. For example, Natalie Cabral, who is one of the leaders at SETI, she's this incredible scientist that's an adventurer as well. She goes down to Chile in South America and climbs to the top of 20,000 foot high volcanoes and free dives in lakes up there. And she just has discovered life up there. And there's an amoeba that she found that's named after her, as an example. And working with people like that is so inspiring. And I think we need to spread the word about the work that these people are doing, because it's inspiring, but it also can give us ideas about what we might want to do, or we may inspire someone else to go into science, and which I think ultimately could lead to just solving this ecological crisis, everyone collaborating together.
I can also piggyback off of what Mike just said, in that it also goes the other way too. You know, as somebody who is a scientist and who was really fascinated by people, you know, like you, Mike, who have this very profound technical ability to kind of help shape stories. That was something that I had absolutely no skill in whatsoever when I started, and it was out of my interest in science communication that I started to look toward people who were in filmmaking and kind of creating these powerful short stories around the science and the research that, you know, either myself was doing or other people in my lab or what have you. And in my case, the project kind of came out of this desire to be a part of the storytelling side of it, not having that experience at all. And so it was kind of the other way around in my case, that I was really inspired by filmmakers and people that were working on storytelling. And so that led to the formation of the series that I've been focused on, and then subsequently how to make that series something that could be used in an educational setting, because that for me was very, very important from the beginning. So for those of you, if anybody are on this Zoom or this YouTube are educators, the series was really designed for you and for being used in the classroom as a tool to talk about these complex issues in a way that is easy to digest and also hopefully a bit inspirational along the way. So my action component for this series is really about the educational curriculum. Sorry, that's my kitchen sink.
Well, thank you, each of you, for sharing all of that. And I think, you know, something that is being kind of spoken around is around like what are the actions that we can take to ensure a better future for our environment. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. What are the actions that we as individuals can take or collectively take to ensure a better future for our environment?
Well, I think spreading appreciation for our environment will open so many eyes. I think people need a deep education on climate change in order to know their own part in the movement. So I think education on the matter will bring people the inspiration to protect our planet as well, because of their love they have for their home. And I believe we all have the capability to ensure a better future. So it just takes the knowledge of our own influence to start changing our ways and start taking care of our environment.
I really agree with because in school there's just like nothing that we learn about the climate crisis or anything, and I think it would be really important if people were actually educated at an earlier age, and also running for office. Like as you get older, if you can have a say in something that's important, that could really make it.
Yeah, Jamie, that is such a good point. And I think that when we talk about what can we all do individually or collectively, I think that being a part of political coalitions and groups that are really pushing to make the change that is required is important, right? We know that democracy dies when we aren't participating and really focused on it. So I think that that's a huge part of it. And I also will say that it's kind of a balance, I think, between individual actions and pressure on corporations and larger entities. I know that in the broader conversation around climate change, it kind of waffles between, should we just, oh, it's useless for you to change your light bulb or put on solar panels, you should just be putting pressure on corporations, and then kind of went back the other way. No, actually individuals have a role to play. And what I'll say about that is that it is both. And I think that there's mounting evidence that individual actions over time do make a difference when your neighbors see what you're doing, when your peers see what you're doing. And so, of course, we need to be putting pressure on corporations. Those are absolutely like the bulk of the challenge that we're facing. But I do think that doesn't mean you should scale down on what your individual impact can be over time. And there's some studies that are coming out about solar panels and people putting them on their roofs, and then their neighbors will do it, and then the whole neighborhood will do it. So collectively, it makes a difference over time. So to me, it's both. And yeah, as Jamie said, definitely stay engaged politically.
I agree with everything that's been said. This is something we're asked at the California Academy all of the time, and it's a very complex question, but it's all of the above, really. Vote, support candidates that are helping solve the ecological crisis, or if you can't vote, influence your parents or your friends who can vote. And also fight for social justice too. What I've learned over time is that social justice and environmental justice are two sides of the same coin. We're all humans. We're part of the earth. We're not above it. So, and oftentimes ecological damage affects the most vulnerable people in our society. So, as seen in Elise's video, for example, empowering vulnerable communities to improve their environment is a very good way to improve the environment overall. It's a great example, and you're helping people on the local level improve their life. And therefore, that can become an example that other people can follow as well.
I love you bringing in that dimension, Mike, and everything everyone said, I think is really resonated with me. And I think that, in addition to simply supporting communities who are most impacted by the climate crisis, I think also just amplifying it, right? I think what Alize's work does so beautifully is really amplifying work that's already being done. I think sometimes there's this idea that that vulnerable populations are just sitting there waiting for things to happen, and that couldn't be further from the truth. They're already doing things and really amplifying the solutions that people are already working on is so important. So I think we need to move on to ask some of the audience questions. So I wanted to start, one that came through was there a key moment for each of you, or did you kind of gradually grow awareness and caring for the natural world?
Well, my mom is from South Africa, so I have been going on trips there since a fairly young age, and I just have loved the natural world for as long as I can remember. But starting to interview people, like having the idea to actually attempt to take action, I think was more gradual. And it did, I think, start when I was in South Africa, my family, we came across a rhino that had been poached for its horn. And that was just so terrible that I just felt like I needed to do something.
What a terrible thing to have to witness, and we hear about it, but I can imagine that witnessing that firsthand had an even more profound impact.
I've been interested in it hasn't been gradual. Well, I've gradually learned and found as I get older, I find out that I know very little and there's so much more to learn, but I've always been interested in the natural world. I grew up in Utah, spent a lot of time in the desert exploring and also in the mountains. So that was very impactful for me as a young person, and I've always been interested in going outside, which is a very good, just good for the soul and feeling human and being part of nature. So, but it's been gradual in terms of a learning process about what is actually happening. I mean, the ecological crisis has been, the concept of global warming has been around for a very long time, and watching it throughout my life, seeing action not being taken has been very frustrating. But seeing all of you and the projects you're working on and working with scientists and other people and seeing the incredible work that's being done is very inspiring, and I have a lot of hope that we will solve this problem. It will take time, but if we all just continue with our art and telling stories, I think we can really pull it off. It's just going to take time, and I think deep down, everyone cares about this. You just need to remind them of it.
My inspiration sort of started when I was younger, I think, just growing up in a place. I grew up in Ithaca, New York, upstate New York. I'm currently living in Miami, but that was a really wholesome and wonderful place to be a child. And I grew up in a kind of unique house that was on the edge of a lake. So I had a lot of exposure to the outdoors from an early age. But actually, for me, the real moment that my career took off in the direction that it did was when I took AP Environmental Science my junior year in high school. And that was the first time that I, Jamie, as you said, climate curriculum is not something, I mean, certainly this was back in 2007. So it certainly wasn't there then. And I know that it's really limited even today, but it was the first course I had ever taken where I understood the relationship between humans and the environment and our impact on the environment. And that's really what made me pursue a career in the social sciences and understanding, seeking to understand how we can improve and better or, better integrate our human lives with the world around us, our natural environments. So that really became the basis of my research over the next decade, but also now, of course, my film making is very much focused on this connection between humans and nature and how we can make it better.
Isabella, do you have anything to add? I know you talked a little bit about your upbringing earlier, but I'm not sure if you have anything that you'd like to add now.
No, I think what all you said was amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So another audience question that has come up is, and I'm not sure if it's relevant to all of you, but if you do have something, please do share. What is the most interesting wisdom that you've gleaned from interacting with Indigenous peoples as you've crafted your films or your artistic work, or really it can be anything around the environmental movement?
I'm happy to chime in here. I apologize. My dishwasher is making my sink make a lot of noise. So if there's some funny sounds in the background, that's what it is. I've had the immense privilege of being able to spend time with different communities around the world and understanding how they're living with various environmental changes and social changes. And one of the things that has struck me the most in looking at climate change and climate change adaptation on a community level is the ability to evolve with evolving landscapes. Like, how do we not resist change? And obviously, we're dealing with a version of change here that is perpetuated by our reliance on fossil fuels and the combustion of fossil fuels, which needs to change. But I think that in general, what I was really struck by was how kind of this flexibility or willingness to move and live kind of in balance with the natural environment. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that many communities are not so distant from their natural environment as we are in a kind of more industrialized context over here in United States or Europe or wherever. And I think that for me, the most illuminating part of all of it was to see how different communities are able to live with a greater sense of, to kind of use a trite phrase like roll with the punches. And that's not to downplay the gravity of the issues they're facing at all, but it's just for me, it was a reminder of how can we not dig our heels in and try and keep everything exactly the way it is and was, and that this will be for the way the future will exist forever. I think there has to be some movement and dynamism in our lifestyles that I found very present in many different Indigenous communities.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Elise. And I know that Jamie actually has to take off now to attend a school event. So I just wanted to take just a quick moment to thank Jamie so much for sharing your work, for sharing your wisdom. And we so enjoyed having you here today. So with that, Jamie, I know you need to take off. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was amazing hearing all of your thoughts and being part of this.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye. As we kind of wrap up here, Alize, I think I really appreciated you sharing that, this idea of dynamism, of moving towards something different than what we've had. And it really strikes me, Mike, that your work in the regreening sequence is really trying to kind of like bridge, a lot of that gap. And I'm curious whether in creating that sequence and in the research that went into that work, did you and Cal Academy work with Indigenous peoples?
We didn't work with any particular Indigenous group in the Bay Area. It was mainly, more so, I corresponded a bit with the San Francisco Estuary Institute and the Conservation Lands Network, which are doing quite a bit of work collecting data about land use in California and the Bay Area in particular, and then doing studies and figuring out ways to regenerate the natural world of the Bay Area in particular through landscape topology and scientific concepts that will allow us to mitigate sea level rise and that type of thing. But we didn't work it with any particular Native American group in the Bay Area to achieve this. However, while working on the shot, we didn't have a lot of time in the show to present this idea of regreening, and so it goes by quickly. We're high up above the Bay Area, so it's a very abstract scene that doesn't get into any particular collaboration or design problem that's being addressed in the Bay Area at the moment. However, if we were to do it again or we had more time, that shot alone could make a show unto itself. And in a way, I would love to do that. And that absolutely would include Native American peoples of the Bay Area historically and who are living here now, and what's happening with them as part of our Bay Area community, because it's an integral part of the story of the history of the Bay Area, and all of it needs to be told.
Yes, I completely agree. And I didn't manage to get to talk to any Indigenous peoples either for my film, but in the future, I'm going to Ecuador in 6 weeks, and I'm definitely planning on interviewing Indigenous peoples there. I think it was difficult contacting people during the pandemic, and really getting all the input you'd like.
Well, thank you all so much.
I was just going to add one thing about our prior film that we created was a documentary about astronomy in Chile, down in South America. And while we were there, we were in northern Chile where the Atacameño people live, and we worked with them there to include them in our film and provide an indigenous perspective in terms of astronomy and how they use the sky and view the sky. But they also acted as guides for us to pick locations to shoot. So it's something that we would like to do more and more in the future, and there's so much to learn.
Yeah, thank you all so much. There is so much to learn, and again, just calling back the fact that there's so many people in Indigenous communities who are already doing amazing work in the environmentalism movement, and we can really learn so much. So, to kind of wrap things up as we end here, I just wanted to ask one last question, which is, what makes you feel hopeful about our future as a planet?
Well, I have a lot of hope for the future of our planet, and this is because there are such good people in this world, and I think focusing on them and their amazing words is what makes me inspired. Especially people like Amanda Gorman and Greta Thunberg are the women I look up to most. I love them and how they fight for what they believe. I think it's amazing, and they give me a new view on our future, and this gives me hope.
Yes, I have an incredible amount of hope as well. I mentioned it earlier, and a lot of it is driven by the people that I work with and the work that they're doing, especially the scientists, but all walks of life across the community working together to improve the environment. Again, I feel like a lot of people really care about this. They just need our help. They need to learn about what the tools they can use in order to solve the ecological crisis. So that's where we come in as storytellers and artists, spreading the word about the knowledge that we've acquired and the knowledge that we don't have yet, and how we can get there to improve our science and our storytelling to finally feel like something that we're turning the corner, and we don't have to worry about climate change anymore.
Yeah, I would say my inspiration these days is really driven by a lot of the younger generation out there really working. You know, this is a generation that's being raised with environmental issues as a part of their everyday life and being talked about social, kind of both at home and out with peers. People like you, Isabella, who are really kind of taking that on in your own way to make a difference. And I've been so inspired by what I've seen by younger folks right now trying to demand that politicians take action. And that's for me is a huge inspiration in my own work.
Thank you all for sharing your reasons for hope for the future and all of the different ways that we can reimagine a future moving forward. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for our conversation today. And as we wrap up, I would love to thank each of you, each of our filmmakers for lending your voice to today's event, including Jamie, who had to take off. We are so, so grateful for your work, for your sharing, for your wisdom, and for helping us to imagine a better future. I'd also like to thank the audience for joining us today, especially students and educators participating in our Stories program and challenge this year. And if you'd like more information about the Stories program, please see our final slide. The submission period for this year's film challenge begins on February 28th and closes on March 21st. And we also invite you to mark your calendar now for our next Meet the Moment event, which will take place on February 16th. And details on how to register for that will be on our website next week. I'm wishing all of you a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you for joining us today.